We have started the live streaming, I see.
Oh, thank you, because I can't tell on my end.
Do we have everyone on board yet? I'm going to give the 2-minute warning momentarily.
No one is waiting to be promoted. So for now, yes. Nope, let me take that back. I don't see Robert Bob. And here is
I'm always bad at this. Oh, there he is. Commissioner Al-Khatib.
okay.
Commissioner Bob, the only commissioner or alternate that we're missing?
3, 4, 5, 6. Yes.
Two-minute warning, everyone.
And there he is.
David, I'm not completely confident that all of the names that I have for the upcoming reports are correct. So if you hear me stating an incorrect name, please correct me in the moment.
We'll do it. We did double check after you mentioned it, but we will definitely let you know if necessary.
Okay, because I made some changes, so I don't know what changes you may have made after I made changes. We'll figure it out.
Figure it out.
Is everybody ready to go? Okay, good afternoon to the attending public, to WMSC staff, and to my fellow commissioners and alternates. I hereby call this remote meeting of the WMSC Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission to order. This meeting is being recorded as well as streamed live for the public. Ms. Fultz, do we have a quorum today?
It appears that we do, and because we are meeting remotely, I will call the roll to make sure that we have a quorum and also that the minutes accurately reflect today's participants. An alternate will participate in the public meeting to reach a quorum if needed, and if one or both members from that jurisdiction are absent. And so when I call your name, please answer with present. Chair Hart?
Present.
Commissioner Al-Khatib?
Present.
Commissioner Bob?
Present.
Commissioner Farrar-Dyke?
Present.
Commissioner Hull?
Present.
Commissioner Rush?
Present.
and alternate Commissioner Lobby.
Present.
We have a quorum of members, so for that reason, the alternate will not be required to participate, and we have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Foltz. We will start today with our safety message from the WMSC Emergency Management Specialist, Richard David. Mr. David?
Thank you, Chair Hart. Please remain vigilant and considerate about your own safety and that of others. Continue to follow public health recommendations and local orders, including those about wearing masks. Mask and hand washing can help protect you from more than just COVID-19. Between summer camps, family vacations, and the start of the school year approaching, ensure vaccinations are up to date for your whole family. Stay healthy, stay safe, and stay informed about the changing health guidance and local rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. David. We will now move on to the minutes from our last meeting. So Secretary Treasurer Farrar Dyke, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. The minutes were posted for your review of the June 29th meeting. In addition, I would like to report out on the executive session held on June 29th. The commission confirms that it discussed only internal WMSC personnel matters in accordance with the requirements of United States Code Title V, Section 552B, subsection C2 during that executive session. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? If not, I move approval of the June 29th minutes as circulated. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Al,
I believe it was Commissioner Rush.
all right, has seconded the motion. I will ask General Counsel Allison Foltz to conduct the roll call vote.
Thank you. Chair Hart,
Approve.
Commissioner Al-Khatib,
Approved.
Commissioner Bob,
Approved.
Commissioner Farrar Dyke,
Approve.
Commissioner Hull,
Approved.
and Commissioner Rush.
Approved.
Thank you. The minutes are approved.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Now we'll move on to public comments. We provide an opportunity for public comments at each of our meetings, and we will now ask if any members of the public who have joined our Zoom webinar would like to speak. If you do, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom and our staff will unmute one person at a time. Each person will have a maximum of 2 minutes. I will pause now to see if we have any public comments. Ms. Hogan, do we have anyone who has indicated they would like to speak?
No, Chair Hart, no one has raised their hand.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hogan. Hearing none, I would also remind everyone, including those of you watching on YouTube, that you can always report any concerns through our website, wmsc.gov, through our social media channels like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or by email. We will now continue with the next agenda item, which is my remarks. Our meeting today includes updates on the WMSC's ongoing safety oversight activities, consideration of final safety event investigation reports, and an update on some corrective action plans and audits. Dr. Meyer, do you have any opening remarks?
Yes, I do. I first want to say that our team is monitoring the reported shooting earlier today outside the Pentagon Metro Station. Although this initially appears to be a security event, the WMSC is prepared to evaluate any aspects of the event relating to operational safety and emergency preparedness, including the evacuation of the Pentagon Rail Station, which Metro Rail reported to us as required, and aspects of the response on the roadway, if any. Metro Rail suspended service on parts of the blue, yellow, and green lines as part of their response. We wish the best to those injured in today's event, and today's event is a harsh reminder of the emergency preparedness required of today's transit systems. I have several other updates for you. First, we continue our oversight of Metro Rail's safety certification process. When properly followed, the safety certification process identifies hazards and ensures that they have been mitigated to an acceptable level of risk before a project is completed and placed into revenue service. This provides assurance that a project, equipment, or a system will operate as safely as reasonably practical. We have identified some areas of concern when it comes to safety certification, including those findings issued previously in the roadway maintenance machine and the automatic train control and signaling audits earlier this year. We continue to investigate these concerns more closely, including in our day-to-day work and in our work on the rail car and traction power audits that we're finalizing now. Metrorail's safety certification procedures require that this process be carried out for a variety of projects, including the new Potomac Yard Metrorail station being built in Alexandria, and for signals work, such as at the replacement of the signal system recently completed in the Alexandria Rail Yard. Safety certification is also the process that Metrorail must follow to safely activate Silver Line Phase 2. For that project, our continuing oversight has shown that Metrorail and the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority have dedicated significant resources to the safety certification process that we oversee. Metrorail must demonstrate that it has followed its safety certification process before we at the WMSC can concur that Metrorail is ready to open the line to riders. Our work is to ensure that WMATA and MWA satisfy all of the project controls that they put in place to ensure the project is designed, constructed, tested, and commissioned safely. As we've communicated to Metrorail and the Airports Authority leadership over the past 2.5 years in meetings, in writing, and in other discussions, our required pre-revenue service review of Silver Line Phase 2 is being conducted in 2 parts. The timing of each of these parts depends on the timing of the work that the Airports Authority and Metrorail carry out. The first part of our pre-revenue service review relates to MWA's construction of the project. MWA is working toward substantial completion this fall. MWA continues to work on items that we identified that need to be finished before the project reaches substantial completion. The second part of our pre-revenue service review relates to Metrorail's readiness to operate the line. This includes, among other things, adequate staffing and up-to-date training to ensure that train operators, maintenance personnel, and rail traffic controllers and other applicable Metrorail employees are fully knowledgeable about the operating and maintenance requirements of the new extension. We've continued to focus on this area during our ongoing communications with Metrorail and our regular weekly and monthly observations and discussions of Metrorail's preparations. We expect even more extensive work and observations in this area once Metrorail moves into pre-revenue service preparations. As we've told WMATA, because our focus is on Metrorail's activities, the specific timing of our activities entirely depends on WMATA's activities and progress. When Metrorail has addressed or adequately mitigated any open items and has demonstrated that they followed their own safety certification requirements, the WMSC will be able to concur with Metrorail's process. Our concurrence is required for the line to open for revenue service. As one of several layers of oversight for this project, the timing of our concurrence is wholly dependent on Metrorail's progress on its required pre-revenue service activities. And we've communicated the details of our process and our requirements to Metrorail in writing and in meetings since 2019. That said, we'll have more updates for you on this project in the coming months. On another topic, I have an update related to Metrorail's closed-circuit television or CCTV video. Following the order that the WMSC issued on June 2nd, WMATA and the WMSC discussed an alternative means of providing the WMSC with access to the video required to carry out our work. On July 13, the WMSC issued a protocol that aligns with those discussions. This protocol requires Metrorail to provide the WMSC with any required CCTV video within prescribed time periods, and it establishes a physical location for WMSC staff to monitor live video as part of our regular oversight. This protocol is scheduled to be fully implemented next week. This video is important. CCTV video is important for safety oversight, particularly because it allows us to conduct unobtrusive monitoring of real-world activities. Although a WMSC's inspector's presence in person might change behavior, monitoring video allows the WMSC to observe what is happening when there may be a sense that no one is watching. For similar reasons, it's important that Metrorail make proactive use of video in stations and on trains as part of its regular safety assurance efforts. Related to the investigation reports before you today, I want to highlight the continuing improvement in report quality. Today, you'll see some reports with improvements in fatigue assessments, as well as continued improvement under our oversight to ensure reports are clear and understandable, and that the investigation demonstrates that safety mitigations are needed, what safety mitigations are needed. We continue to work with Metro Rail to ensure that these reports include appropriate systemic corrective actions necessary to reduce the risk of a similar event happening again. We have one new staff member who's joined us since our last public meeting. Natalie Quiroz is our new investigations analyst. She joins us from WMATA, and she's already been able to get right to work, and you'll hear from her later in this meeting. That gives me an opportunity to thank Mr. Lahiru Karunaratne for his service to the WMSC as our business process specialist. He leaves us later this month for another opportunity, and we greatly appreciate his contributions to our organization. I'll end by noting that we do have job openings that we post on our website, wmsc.gov. And currently, that includes a communications specialist position. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Dr. Meyer?
Just a comment,
Okay.
if I might.
Please.
I'd just like to commend all involved for reaching a mutually acceptable protocol for the CCTV access. I think that's a job well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall. And now to that point, I was going to add, is that a more or less a permanent setup that you have there, or does that have specific design for COVID?
It's not specifically designed with any particular COVID safety protocols in mind. So we anticipate that this is the way forward on CCTV access. But as I said in my remarks, the full implementation of the protocol is scheduled for completion next week. And so we will have to report back to you on how our utilization of the protocol is operating before we decide whether any further activities are required.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Are there any questions from any other commissioners for Dr. Meyer? Okay, hearing none. Normally at this point in the agenda, we would consider any consent agenda items, but we have no consent agenda items on our agenda for today, so we will move on to our safety event investigations. For the first safety investigation, I would like to welcome the new investigations analyst, Ms. Quiroz, that Dr. Meyer introduced. I would like to ask her to present our first investigation report, Whiskey 0092. Ms. Quiroz?
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0092 involves a near miss of a collision on the green and yellow line on January 22nd, 2021. A work vehicle headed toward Fort Totten Station moved into an overnight work zone that was being set up by another work crew. This move was made with the permission of a rail controller. A roadway worker in charge establishing a work zone was standing on the tracks next to the interlocking near Georgia Avenue, Pentworth Station, when an equipment operator moved the prime mover into the interlocking and crossed from one track to another. The roadway worker in charge estimated that the vehicle came within approximately 200 feet of them. At the time of this event, Metro Rail was rushing to get work crews into position for overnight work. Earlier in the overnight shift, an ROCC controller had allowed automatic train control technicians to start work near Braddock Road before all trains had returned to the rail yard and before work crews had moved into place. This ATC work disrupted control of switches in that area and slowed vehicle movement. Just before the prime mover was routed through the work area near Georgia Avenue, ROCC management had switched the radio controller and button controller responsible for movement in this area. ROCC management was concerned that the buttons controller could not handle the ongoing workload. That controller was newly certified. On the overnight or out shift, the button controller typically has a higher workload than the radio controller. After the near miss, the prime mover continued to Fort Totten Station. The roadway worker in charge attempted to contact the ROCC on the phone, but was put on hold. Eventually, the RIC reached a controller who denied routing a vehicle through the work zone. The RIC was transferred to an assistant superintendent to report the improper roadway worker protection. The RIC was not removed for post-event drug and alcohol testing as required by Metro Rail policy. This investigation identified areas of significant practical drift away from written procedures in the establishment of work zones and lack of clarity on aspects of work zone setup and responsibility. Among other things, foul time protection is not being requested and granted for each part of the process of establishing a fixed work zone. Instead, Metro Rail is acting with blanket requests that do not clearly identify the locations of or protections for personnel while a work zone is still being established. Metro Rail personnel, including management, are not clear on who is responsible for vehicle movement and other protections in an area between the time of an initial request and the time that the work zone setup is completed. After this event, Metro Rail reviewed current procedures with ROCC controllers and field personnel. Metro Rail is in the process of rewriting its roadway worker protection procedures and its rule book more generally. Metro Rail expects to take more significant steps in these areas in coming months. ROCC controller training, certification workload, and staffing improvements are required to be improved through Metro Rail corrective action plans related to the ROCC audit report and other related findings that the WMSC issued last year. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Quiroz. Are there any questions for Ms. Quiroz from any of the commissioners? One question I have is to what steps is Metro taking because they didn't do post-event drug and alcohol testing? What steps are they taking to fix that problem?
Chair Hart, I'll take this, Ms. Quiroz. Several aspects for this. There has been an ongoing concern that Metro Rail's drug and alcohol policies are not being applied consistently when it comes to post-incident testing. They are not being complied with consistently as the written requirements require. In some instances, we see individuals who are involved in an incident being sent for testing and others in the same event are not sent for testing, as you've seen here. In order to get a systemic and comprehensive resolution to this issue that seems to percolate time and time again, we will be communicating to Metro through our fitness for duty audit eventually to ensure that this is addressed comprehensively. But currently, this issue is being addressed. Metro is aware of the inconsistency of the practice, and they are working to resolve this in the near term as well.
Thank you, Ms. Samar Singh. That's very helpful. I just didn't want to give the impression that this was an issue that we had left unaddressed in our consideration of this report. Are there any questions from any of the other commissioners? All right, hearing none, is there a motion to adopt investigation report Whiskey 0092?
So moved.
Commissioner Bob, so moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Al-Khatib. I will now ask General Counsel Fultz to conduct our recorded vote.
Thank you. Chairman Hart,
Approve.
Commissioner Al-Khatib,
Approved.
Commissioner Bob,
Approved.
Commissioner Farrar-Dyke,
Approve.
Commissioner Hall,
Approve.
and Commissioner Rush.
Approve.
Thank you. Safety Event Investigation Report W0092 is adopted.
Thank you, Ms. Fultz. Ms. Quiroz, please present our next investigation report, Whiskey 0093.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0093 involves improper movement from U Street Station on December 9th, 2020. At the time of this event, Metro Rail was single tracking in this area of the green and yellow lines due to a Metro Transit Police Department response to a member of the public on the roadway between stations. Because of this service disruption and the risk of a collision if trains were moving through the area, our rail controller instructed the operator of train 506 at Shaw Howard University Station to continue northbound U Street Station under a permissive block, cross from track 1 to track 2, then reverse ends to be in service southbound towards Branch Avenue. The train operator acknowledged those instructions but did not perform 100% repeat back. In the investigative interview, the operator said they felt complete repeat backs were not possible due to the heavy radio traffic during the disruption. The train operator's limited repeat back that was provided suggested a potential deficiency in physical characteristic training, since the repeat back suggested that Mount Vernon Square was further down the line in the direction of travel. In fact, the train had passed Mount Vernon Square a few minutes earlier. The ROCC controller acknowledged the incomplete and improper repeat back as being proper. After the train serviced U Street Station, the train operator improperly moved the train into the single tracking area toward Columbia Heights Station without speed commands. Vehicle data showed the train was already in stop and proceed mode at this time, and therefore there was no redundant protection in place against this improper movement. Approximately 1 minute after the train began moving toward Columbia Heights, the ROCC controller contacted the train operator. By that point, the train had regained speed commands. The controller allowed the train operator to complete their trip to Greenbelt. This was the final scheduled trip of the operator's shift. The Metro Rail Safety Department has committed to a radio transmission monitoring process to identify necessary corrective actions. This will be focused on service disruptions. ROCC management will work with the safety department to address issues that are identified. Metro Rail has several open, ongoing corrective action plans that relate to this investigation. These caps include those related to movement with 0 speed commands, red signal overruns, station overruns, response to unplanned emergencies, and the use of proper and complete radio protocols. While this event did not result in damage or injuries, it is the same type of movement that resulted in an October 2019 collision near Farragut West Station and July 7th, 2020 derailment outside Silver Spring Station. In addition to the open caps noted above, this event is one of several indications that WMATA may not have adequate physical characteristics training for employees. The WMSC is investigating this issue further through inspections, data reviews, and other oversight activities. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Key Rose. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners? Ms. Key Rose. My question, which may or which may not be for you, Ms. Key Rose, but may be for others in the staff, is: are we satisfied that there are a lot of big picture issues raised by this investigation? Are we satisfied that we're looking into those big picture issues as much as we should be?
Chair Hart, yes, you are absolutely correct in saying that we are satisfied because we do continue to pursue these aspects in terms of the corrective actions that Ms. Quiroz noted more holistically. We are definitely not at a point where we can say that Metro has addressed these completely, given the fact that these incidents continue to happen and the deficiencies noted are continuing to be implicated. So we continue to have ongoing discussions and oversight activities to, on the one hand, assess the corrections that are being put in place, and also to determine what additional corrections need to happen in spite of the corrective measures that are already being put in place by Metro. So it's a continuous effort, and safety is not static. When one aspect is considered and resolved, others arise. And so we continue to monitor the entire system with these things in mind on an ongoing basis.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Samarasinha. That's very helpful. I just don't want to give the impression by our approval of this report, if we approve it, don't want to give our impression that we feel that all of the issues have already been satisfactorily addressed and that we're looking into the big picture issues, and we'll continue to do so. Are there any questions from any of the other commissioners for Ms. Key Rose? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to adopt investigation report Whiskey 0093?
So moved.
Commissioner Rush moved. Is there a second? Thank you.
Second.
Okay, Commissioner Hall second. I will now ask General Counsel Fultz to conduct our recorded vote.
Thank you very much. Chairman Hart.
Approved.
Commissioner Al-Khatib. I think I heard you.
Approved.
Thank you.
Approved.
Thank you. Commissioner Bob.
Approved.
Commissioner Farrar-Dyke.
Approve.
Commissioner Hull.
Approve.
And Commissioner Rush.
Approved.
Thank you. Safety Investigation Report W0093 is adopted.
Thank you, Ms. Fultz. Ms. Key Rose, please present our next investigation report, Whiskey 0094.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0094 involves a train that moved on the wrong track after departing King Street Station on February 18th, 2021. The intended destination was Franconia Springfield, but the train ended up moving toward Huntington. The train was designated as a yellow line train and appeared in the ROCC's Advanced Information Management System as a yellow line train with faint blue stripes. This designation was due to a long-term shutdown of the blue line for platform construction work. Normally, trains toward Huntington would appear yellow, and trains toward Franconia Springfield would appear blue. In the ROCC, just before this event, the button controller had taken over dual duties as the radio controller. The radio controller was attending a safety briefing. The train operator did not recognize that the rail alignment, signal aspect, or other signage at the station showed that the route was set toward Huntington Station rather than Franconia Springfield. For the correct route, the signal would have been flashing to indicate a diverging or turning route, and the lit signage at the station platform would have indicated the route was set toward the blue line. Instead, the signal was solid, indicating a straight through move. After the train had moved toward Huntington, the train operator reported the misroute. The controller said over the radio they thought the train was supposed to be going to Huntington. The train was allowed to continue to Eisenhower Avenue Station so the customers could board a train in the opposite direction back to King Street Station to connect to a different train toward Franconia Springfield. As corrective actions, the ROCC is examining contingency planning in the event one controller is away from the desk. More generally, elements of ROCC controller training, certification, and staffing are under review or improvement through several open corrective action plans related to WMSC findings, including findings from the ROCC audit issued last year. As part of these corrective actions, Metrorail has committed to significantly increasing ROCC controller staffing, which would allow for appropriate breaks, training, and emergency support as part of regular schedules. Metrorail also has a separate open cap related to radio communication. There has been significant improvement over the last several years. It is imperative that Metrorail continue to improve radio discipline even after that cap is closed. In response to this event, the safety department is also planning to work with automatic train control departments to determine whether additional line junction signals should be added. The WMSC is separately reviewing the sufficiency of Metrorail's physical characteristics training. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Key Rose. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Key Rose on this report?
Chairman Hart, I have a couple of questions.
Yes, please, Commissioner Lowry.
In this and several of the other accidents that we've covered and will cover, we have a problem with repeat back. You know, in this one, the train operator told ROCC the correct destination, but there was no 100% repeat back from the controller. Can you explain exactly what that means? What's the requirement for 100% repeat back?
Sure. So for 100% repeat back, when the train said my destination is Franconia, the controller for 100% repeat back should have said, I copy or affirmative, your destination is Franconia Springfield, over. And they didn't say that part. They just said, I copy, but they didn't say what they copied. So you have to say what you think you heard.
And you're not allowed to proceed without a 100% repeat back or a confirmation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In the case of getting a track instruction, you know, what really rules? Is it what the ROCC asks for, or is it the wayside signals? Because I think sometimes the wayside signals maybe not agree with what the instructions are that are given to the operator. Is that an issue?
Sure, that's a good point. Train operators, a lot of what they are trained is to move the train. If they have a lunar and speed commands, they are trained to move the train. So if there's anything that deviates out of that, when yes, they are supposed to listen to the ROCC's instructions, I say probably their number one thing that they are trained on is to move the train, as long as they have a lunar signal and speed commands.
And is that ever in conflict with the instructions that they're given by the ROC?
Yes, yes, that's why the 100% repeat back is so important on both sides, for the train operators and on the controller side.
Okay, thank you. I'll have a couple more questions on some of the later accident reports, but
Just
thank you for that answer.
interject a question that Ms. Quiroz might be able to further expound on. If a train operator is presented with a conflict between a ROC controller's instruction and the wayside signals or the cab signals, is it correct to say that the train operator needs to be governed by the signal system unless the controller has provided explicit permission otherwise?
Yes, I would say yes, that's correct.
Thank you. And I had another question I meant to ask in a previous report, just for the benefit of the general public that's attending this meeting. What is the role of the button controller?
So the button controller actually sets the routes. The radio is on the radio doing the communication with personnel in the field. The button controller sets the routes, and also the button controller's responsibility answers the phone. So whenever there's a phone call or to make notifications during emergencies, the button controller would call the assistant superintendent. They would call the information controllers. They would call the maintenance operations for any notifications.
So that controller is not necessarily on the radio continuously. That's another controller, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Again, this is another event with quite a few big picture issues. So Ms. Marsing, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to give some comments on some of the big picture issues that are presented by this event.
So we continue to pursue the need for a much more comprehensive and specific physical characteristics training that is much more present in, say, FRA controlled properties or other rail transit systems across the US. Physical characteristics training, or the lack thereof here, is implicated in the train operator as well as the controller not fully understanding the location of the train or the direction of travel of the train in this instance. And even in the previous investigations that have been adopted now, we talked about the fact that the train operator in many instances was confused as to where they found themselves on the rail system. It's extremely essential that the train operator know where they reside on the metro rail system at any given point in time, because there are conditions at various points in the system that governs their behavior, signals, interlockings, switches, and so forth. And so we continue to gather information through our own field monitoring and other activities to validate the emerging need for a comprehensive physical characteristics training at Metro for train operators and maintainers especially.
So what's an example of what would be covered in physical characteristics training?
The layout of the entire system, the location of signals, the location of switches and interlocking in the entirety of the system, whether certain parts of the system have an ascending or descending grade, which would then instruct the train operators if they were on manual mode, which Metro Rail has been on manual mode for 11 years, would instruct them on how they conduct train handling, because whether it's in ascending or descending grade, that would provide them indications on the level of speed that they might be operating that train at, or the level of braking that they would need to apply in order to bring the train to a stop. So these are the very fundamental aspects of physical characteristics training. And of course, what track they're on, or which chain markers they are at. Those are unique to the system. And so a physical characteristics training program has to be tailored to meet the unique characteristics of the Metro Rail system.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Are there any more questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Quiroz on this report? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to adopt investigation report Whiskey 0094?
So moved.
So moved, Commissioner Al-Khatib. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Rush. I will now ask, thank you for the motion in the second. I will now ask General Counsel Foltz to conduct our recorded vote.
Thank you. Chairman Hart,
Approved.
Commissioner Al-Khatib,
Approved.
Commissioner Bob,
Approved.
Commissioner Farrar-Dyke,
Approve.
Commissioner Hull,
Approve.
and Commissioner Rush.
Approve.
Thank you. Safety Event Investigation Report W0094 has been adopted.
Thank you, Ms. Foltz. Our subject matter expert, Mr. Jermaine Walker, for track and structures, Mr. Jermaine Walker will present the next report, Whiskey 0095. Mr. Walker?
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0095 involves a work vehicle derailment near Arlington Cemetery Station on March 26, 2021. Keywood contractors working in a long-term shutdown area for platform reconstruction were backing flat cars through a switch using a high rail vehicle. The second of three flat cars derailed. The movement was done with the tailgates on the flat cars down, despite requirements in a move permit that flat cars only be moved with the tailgates up. It appears this may have been done in an effort to save time, despite the safety risks. No Metro Rail employees were present for this move. A Keywood superintendent was directing the Keywood high rail vehicle operator with two other contractors serving as spotters. When one of the flat cars derailed, the superintendent directed the vehicle operator to re-rail the flat car using an excavator without notifying Metro Rail or the WMSC. The superintendent and vehicle operator said they did not know about accident reporting procedures or the need to preserve an accident scene. While both were tested for drugs and alcohol, that testing was not done immediately. They returned to work while results were pending, contrary to Metro Rail's drug and alcohol policy. Metro Rail refers to these long-term shutdown areas as authorized construction sites, where Metro Rail reduces the number of WMATA employees and removes elements of roadway worker protection rules. Because this scene was not maintained and fully documented, our assessment of the stated root causes of this derailment was limited. However, the derailment and documentation that is available does suggest that the forces from this improper movement could have caused the flat car to derail. To be clear, Metro remains responsible for safety in these construction areas, including accident reporting, accident investigation integrity, and overall safety requirements. Keywood conducted a safety stand-down related to high rail vehicle movements and was directed to inform staff of safety investigation roles and responsibilities. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Again, lots of big picture issues, especially regarding contractors and what contractors know and should do and what they're doing. And I'm going to, again, Ms. Marsing, ask you if you have any thoughts on what's happening with respect to Metro's use of contractors.
So a few points here, Chair Hart and the commissioners. The authorized construction zone, which is within which this event took place, we have communicated to Metro ever since we were certified in March of 2019 that regardless of whether contractors have control of a section of track or not, for a protracted period or not, Metro Rail has responsibilities for ensuring the safety of whoever is on that system or that section of the system, and for reporting events as they occur and ensuring that investigations and the integrity of the investigations are preserved when things do happen and accidents need to be investigated. So with that in mind, we have been making sure that we gather all the relevant information, including the written requirements that govern authorized construction zones or ACSs, to ensure that we know what it is that we need to continue to review and monitor in order for us to have an ongoing understanding of how well safety is promoted in authorized construction zones. And so, again, as an answer to the other questions that you've raised today, We are satisfied with the work that we are doing. We continue to gather more tools and more information to fine tune our information gathering and work. But currently, we feel that we have a focus on authorized construction zones to ensure that we understand what's going on. In future authorized construction zones, these occur for finite periods of time, even though they might be for weeks or months on end. We now understand that there are plans that are assembled, comprehensive plans about who does what work at what point in time and what safety features are present. All of those things will be used for us to conduct monitoring to ensure these zones practice the highest levels of safety practicable.
Thank you, Ms. Marson. That's very helpful. Are there any questions from the commissioners for Mr. Walker regarding this report?
I have a question, Chair Hart.
Yes, please, Commissioner Lobby.
The contractors involved here were the high rail vehicle operator, who was a contractor, and we also talked about a superintendent. The superintendent, at least in my knowledge, was also a contractor. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Is there someone from Washington Metro responsible for the contractor's actions that's on scene? I can understand maybe the contractors not being familiar with all the requirements, but certainly there needs to be some oversight by Washington Metro, a representative there, to make sure that they follow the WMATA rules and regulations. Is there nobody on scene that does that?
To my knowledge, there's usually someone on scene to conduct a briefing to the contractors and get them in and out. But as far as actually watching the contractors, I can't say that there's always eyes from or a representative from Metro Rail looking directly at the work that the contractors are performing.
So once they do the safety briefing, they're pretty much cut loose to do what they need to do, right?
Putting it lightly, yes, I would say that is correct.
Does that concern you?
It does a little bit, being that this is not the first time and probably won't be the last time that this happened. But we are definitely are having dialogues on ways to improve the ACS and Metro Rail representation while this work is going on. So the best thing I can tell you is we do hope to have improvements and hope to see an end to these derailments in these ACS zones, sir.
And in your view, are the contractors that do this work on Metro, are they as well qualified on the rules, regulations, requirements as a WMATA employee?
I would say based on the training that they receive, I would say yes. They may use different equipment that a lot of WMATA employees may use, but I would say based on the training that they receive and get from the company, that they are very well qualified to do the work that's needed to be done on the property, even if the same people aren't always performing the same work at a specific given time.
But in this case, the contractors didn't immediately get testing and then returned right to work, because that's certainly not per WMATA's testing protocol, is it?
No, it's not. And they should have been briefed a little bit more on what exactly to do when a situation like this arises. And that's something we hope to rectify here shortly.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Lobby. Any questions from any of the other commissioners for Mr. Walker? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to adopt investigation report Whiskey 0095?
So moved.
Moved, Commissioner Bob. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Hull. Thank you for the motion and second. I will now ask General Counsel Foltz to conduct our recorded vote.
Chairman Hart,
Approved.
Commissioner Al-Khatib,
Approved.
Commissioner Bob,
Approved.
Commissioner Farrar Dyke,
Approved.
Commissioner Hull,
Approve.
and Commissioner Rush.
Approved.
Thank you. Safety Event Investigation Report W005 is adopted.
Thank you, Ms. Foltz. I believe our next report is from Mr. Adam Quigley, Whiskey 0096. Mr. Quigley?
Yeah, Hart, I think the correct person who will be presenting this investigation will be Mr. Walker, Jermaine Walker.
Okay, my mistake. Mr. Walker, thank you about that. Sorry to misidentify you.
Not a problem, not a problem. Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0096 involves the collision of two rail maintenance machines, or RMMs, in the Greenbelt Yard on March 9th, 2021. An equipment operator was attempting to move multiple RMMs to reach a different vehicle that they needed for their work assignment. That RMM was stored closely behind other vehicles on a storage track. As the equipment operator attempted to rearrange the vehicles, the equipment operator did not set the handbrake on the ballast regulator. The ballast regulator rolled approximately 2 feet into a tampered vehicle. The event occurred on the same day that the WMSC issued a RMM audit, which identified concerns similar to those highlighted by this safety event related to equipment operator training and work planning. Metro Rail is required to implement corrective action plans for those findings. In addition, this investigation identified a rail yard operations issue. Metro Rail was not following communication procedures for vehicle or switch movement in portions of rail yards that do not have signals. Equipment operators were not communicating with the interlocking operator for movements in this area, which creates the risk of collisions with other vehicles or personnel. The investigation also identified that Metro Rail was not following any safety procedures for separation of parked RMMs to provide a margin of error. In part, this is due to the high number of vehicles Metro Rail attempts to store in the limited storage track space that is available. Following this event, the WMSC conducted a series of additional focus inspections and monitoring efforts. These led to the WMSC findings issued on April 30th. These findings require Metro Rail to address deficiencies in radio communications and rail yards and deficiencies related to the uncoordinated movement and storage of vehicles in non-signal territory. Metro Rail has developed a corrective action plan in response to these findings. Specifically for this event, while those other corrective actions are in process, Metro Rail distributed a lessons learned document focused on the parking and storage of RMMs. Thank you. That completes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Again, Ms. Samarthinga, comments on some of the big picture issues?
So a constant theme in the investigations that have been presented thus far today include the implication of the radio protocols that are in place, and the fact that either operators and controllers don't understand the requirements of the radio protocol, or they don't understand and they don't, as a result, do not comply with the radio protocols as written and required. So there is a corrective action plan that we currently are overseeing that assesses the sufficiency of the radio protocol and how well field personnel, including train operators and equipment operators, comply with the radio protocols, as well as the compliance rate between communications from the field into the Rail Operations Control Center. So we continue to use this corrective action plan that we monitor to monitor activities. And as you can see here, if we see there are more immediate concerns that corrective action plan does not provide a resolution to, we are not reluctant to issue additional requirements. As Mr. Walker described here, on April 30th, we came to the conclusion that additional requirements when it comes to communications in certain rail yards were needed. And so we issued a finding requiring them to address the poor quality of radio communications in the rail yards more holistically. And so the requirement there was to look at the system failures as well as the practices of the individuals who were conducting radio communications in those yards. And so we continue to monitor that as well as the previous corrective action plans on radio protocols to ensure that this is corrected.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Samar Singh. That's very helpful. Are there any other questions for Mr. Walker from any of the other commissioners? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to adopt investigation report Whiskey 0096?
So moved.
Commissioner Al-Khatib, thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
Commissioner Farrar-Dyke, thank you very much. I will now ask General Counsel Foltz to conduct our recorded vote.
Thanks very much. Chairman Hart,
Approve.
Commissioner Al-Khatib,
Approve.
Commissioner Bob,
Approved.
Commissioner Farrar-Dyke,
Approve.
Commissioner Hull,
Approve.
and Commissioner Rush.
Approve.
Thank you. Safety Event Investigation Report W0096 is adopted.
Thank you, Ms. Foltz. Is my information correct that our next report is from Mr. Quigley, or do I need a correction there as well?
It is Mr. Jermaine Walker who will be presenting this, Chair Hart.
Thank you.
Mr. Quigley is not actually with us today.
I see. Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Walker, please present report number Whiskey 0097.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0097 involves a serious injury on February 14th, 2021, near the site of the new Potomac Yard Station. The station is under construction south of Reagan National Airport on the blue and yellow lines. A contractor working to place conduit during a weekend shutdown broke their hip and femur while stepping over the third rail. Mass Electric Construction reported that the contractor broke their plant leg while pivoting over the third rail on track number 1 to move towards track number 2. The Metro Rail roadway worker in charge notified the Rail Operations Information Center, or ROIC, about the injury. The ROIC is a desk in the Rail Operations Control Center. They called for the Alexandria Fire Department. When first responders arrived, they were briefed and brought to the injury location using a prime mover. They and the contractor were brought out of the site on a prime mover, and the injured contractor was taken to a hospital. Mass Electric supervisors reported that this was at least the third time this person had a similar injury. Mass Electric also stated that the overexertion and fatigue may have contributed to the event. Metro Rail does not apply any fatigue or medical fitness for duty standards to contractors. The contractor also was not tested for drugs and alcohol as required under Metro Rail policy. In addition, Metro Rail did not record all critical communications related to this event. The event occurred while the Rail Operations Control Center, including the ROIC, was operating from the backup facility downtown. Metro Rail is required to address these recording deficiencies through corrective action plans related to the WMSC's ROC audit issued last year. The WMSC has transmitted the draft fitness for duty audit report to Metro Rail for 30-day technical review. In addition, as a corrective action plan tied directly to this investigation, Metro Rail Safety Department is considering specific medical assessment confirmation for contractors performing certain types of work. The Safety Department also stated it will conduct site visits and safety observations. Mass Electric Construction conducted a safety stand down. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Again, we have numerous big picture issues especially regarding contractors. Ms. Samar Singh, do you have any thoughts on any of that?
Chair Hart, not in particular to contractors. However, here the important aspect is backup facilities or redundant systems or redundant capacities at Metro. It is important to ensure that in addition to providing continuity of a certain operation or action through redundant systems, we are also in continuous conversations with Metro Rail in general to ensure that these redundant systems operate without any unknown safety gaps not being discovered. That is to say, as they are being utilized as backup facilities, we always encourage Metro to continuously assess whether there are any gaps or unintended hazards introduced by transferring from one primary location to a backup location, and to ensure that preparations are made, that there is no gap in coverage as those transitions are made. So that's one aspect that we continue to talk with Metro Rail in general about. Aside from that, the value of ongoing compliance oversight activities that are conducted by not only the safety department, but all other departments to ensure that employees are conducting rules without practical drift, to provide coaching to any employees who might not be fully aware of the requirements of a given rule. All these are very essential aspects that we continue to promote, that Metro Rail undertake across the Metro Rail organization, not just through the safety department. So those are two aspects that I would like to surface in the discussion surrounding this investigation.
Thank you, Ms. Samar Singh. Are we doing anything in regards to fatigue requirements for contractors?
Yes, as Mr. Walker just reported a few minutes ago, the draft fitness for duty audit report, which we have now transmitted to WMATA for its technical 30-day technical review, does contain requirements to address issues that pertain to contractors in particular, and just in overall ensuring that the program at Metro covers all employees, regardless of whether they are Metro Rail employees or not. As long as they are conducting work within the Metro Rail system, considerations on fatigue should be governing the availability for work, as this incident fully demonstrates.
Excellent. Thank you. I see that I missed that, so I apologize for that. Are there any other questions for any of the, I guess what you're showing, Ms. Samar Singh, is that we're in a learning curve of continuous improvement. So thank you for those reports. Any questions from any of the other commissioners for Mr. Walker? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to adopt investigation report Whiskey 0097?
So moved.
So moved, Commissioner Bob. Is there a second?
Second.
Who was the second from?
Al-Khatib.
Al-Khatib, thank you. Okay, thank you for the motion in the second. I will now ask General Counsel Fultz to conduct our recorded vote.
Thank you. Chairman Hart.
Approved.
Commissioner Al-Khatib.
Approved.
Commissioner Bob.
Approved.
Commissioner Farrar-Dyke.
Approve.
Commissioner Hall.
Approve.
And Commissioner Rush.
Approve.
Thank you. Safety Event Investigation Report W0097 is adopted.
Thank you, Ms. Fultz. I have Mr. Bruce Walker as the next presenter for our subject matter expert on operations. Am I correct on that?
Yes, Chair Hart.
Okay, so Mr. Walker, would you please present to us Whiskey 0098?
Thank you, Chair Hart and Commissioners. Whiskey 0098 investigation involves improper roadway protection at Macon Plaza Station on January 25th, 2021. In this event, Metro directed contractors with no roadway worker protection safety training and without proper personnel protective equipment to enter the roadway. This is contrary to Metro Rail's roadway worker protection procedures. The contractors were initially working on a bathroom demolition project on the mezzanine level above the tracks. A plant maintenance supervisor directed a mechanic who was acting as the roadway worker in charge for the protected area on the roadway below the demolition area to use the contractors to clean up debris that had fallen onto the roadway. The contractors did not have proper protective equipment, including the proper reflective vests, and did not have required roadway worker protection training. The track rights for this work had stated that the cleanup work would be conducted by the plant maintenance personnel, not contractors. Plant maintenance personnel were not present to do the work. The roadway worker in charge did not have access to the general order and track rights systems, or GOTRs. This is the system that specifies the work location, the type of work, and the type of protection that has been approved. Instead, the roadway worker in charge only got information about the work zone via text message from a supervisor. In an interview, the RIC stated this was common practice. In any case, the RIC did not properly set up the work area with the end work area mats or warning strobe alarm devices that will provide a warning if third rail power were inadvertently restored. This safety event was identified after the work was completed when the supervisor who had directed and observed the work was speaking with the plant maintenance superintendent elsewhere in the station. The supervisor was not removed from service for post-event drug and alcohol testing as required by WMATA's policy. The plant maintenance conducted a safety stand down related to RWP rules and will provide RICs and supervisors with copies of their voters' rights and instructions for work assignments. Supervisors and RICs will receive training on the use of GOTR system, including mobile access. More broadly, Metrorail is in the process of a roadway worker protection rules rewrite and overhaul. Thank you, Chair Hart. This completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Again, lots of big picture issues, including the one we already talked about before, post-event drug and alcohol testing. Ms. Samar Singh, again, I'm going to turn to you again on your thoughts on this one.
On this, Chair Hart, the part that we want to emphasize is the roadway worker protection rule exists to protect all who find themselves on the Metrorail right-of-way. These rules have their genesis in many industry best practices that have emerged as a result of either injuries or fatalities that have occurred in various systems, rail systems as well as railroad systems over the past several decades or more. And so all these things, even though they might seem redundant to the untrained eye, are essential to ensuring that roadway workers are protected. So these rules are written with the expectation that they are followed to the law. Otherwise, those same workers are putting themselves in jeopardy in not doing so, and also putting others in jeopardy by not following the roadway worker protection rules that are in place at Metrorail. So it is very essential that is done so. As Mr. Walker noted, there is a comprehensive effort underway to ensure that the rule as written meets the needs of the system, and the Metrorail Chief Safety Officer is undertaking that effort and hopes to have that completed by the end of this year to have a more streamlined roadway worker protection rule. However, as it stands today, the rule as written has to be followed. From the start of the work, when work is determined to be taking place, who is the supervising entity, who the roadway worker in charge is, who the roadway work crews are, what tools they need, ensuring those tools are calibrated, ensuring that they are properly applied on the right-of-way where they are required to be applied as prescribed by the roadway worker protection rule. All those things apply currently. And so it's essential that those things are adhered to. And we will continue to monitor this and ensure that these incidents are taken seriously and used as instructive mechanisms to reduce the incidents and increase the safety of roadway workers on the right-of-way.
Well, thank you, Ms. Samar Singh, and that's very helpful. And when I see repeated non-compliance with rules like this, it raises the question, based on my aviation experience. In aviation, they learned that when rules are made collaboratively, they're much more likely to be followed. And collaboratively means including not only management, but also the workers who have to comply with the rules, because then you make sure that the rules are more realistic to the situation that they will be facing every day. And to the extent they have an ownership interest in it because they help create it, as opposed to just receiving it from management, they are more likely to follow the rules. So I'm just thinking as a very big picture question. I wonder to what extent is collaboration used in developing some of these rules that are repeatedly not being followed?
And the simple answer is it is. Upon the approval of the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, Metro has committed to conducting itself within the framework of safety management systems. And safety management systems is, as you know, a top-down approach to ensuring the highest levels of safety are preserved and maintained on the Metrorail system. As part of that effort, safety promotion and safety collaboration to bring in various insights from various quarters of the organization is something that is being put in place, especially through the efforts of the Chief Safety Officer and the Safety Department in conducting a collaborative effort as rules are written to solicit input from all quarters, from frontline personnel, from supervisors, technical directors, as well as managers. So that is being practiced, although it's in its infancy stages. But the plan is for it to start becoming much more widely integrated into the Metro Rail organization. And
Okay.
this is what we see right now.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Samar Singh. That's very encouraging, and I know that these changes don't happen overnight, but they are major. They represent major improvements. Certainly, they have in aviation, and I'm confident that they can here as well. Having said that, are there any further questions for Mr. Walker from any of the other commissioners?
I do have a question, Chair Hart.
Yes, please.
Apart from the discussion that we've had regarding the supervisory oversight by Metro of contractors conducting work, to our knowledge, are there any consequences for contractors that are implemented by Metro when contractors are violating or not adhering to rules and procedures? Are we aware of anything like that?
The contractors are required to be held to the same standard that WMATA holds their own employees to. So they are not above or excluded from any of the requirements of a WMATA employee. They're held to the same standard.
And I guess, where I'm going with this is where a particular contract entity, let's say repeatedly, is seen to have employees who aren't following or following procedures or rules. It seems to me there may well be some form of consequence to that contract company.
Chairman Hart.
Yes, Commissioner Bob.
Yes, Commissioner Hall, but in this instance, the contract is being directed by Metro supervision. And so I can understand the fact that the contractor can refuse, saying, where this is in violation of the safety rules and policies. However, at the end of the day, the supervision, Metro is the first line of responsibility, at least in my judgment, because it's in fact directing the contractor to perform a certain duty, which is not in compliance with its own safety rules.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Bob.
Chairman Hart, I have a couple of questions.
Commissioner Lobby, please.
Very interesting discussion, and Commissioner Bob is, from my reading, is absolutely correct. This roadway worker in charge basically let these folks down on the track, and from what I can see, they're not. They're essentially rebuilding a bathroom. So I'm not sure if they're laborers or plumbers, but under no circumstances, people that have no training, should they ever be allowed to be on the right of way. And so WMATA is fully responsible for letting these folks who are not qualified to go down and basically clean up this debris from a bathroom remodeling that's taking place. But certainly in our other accidents, contractors, they are trained. Some of them are trained to be on the roadway, and those folks, there should be a downside for not following Washington Metro's requirements. So I do feel that they need to be responsible, but in this particular accident, not these particular individuals. But in the big picture, as you've discussed throughout this, Chair Hart, roadway worker protection is an issue in 4 or 5 of the accidents that we're covering today. And it seems to go on and on and on. And I understand that Washington Metro is trying to rewrite some of the requirements, but they apparently cannot even follow the existing requirements. And I'm really baffled and a bit disturbed that Washington Metro personnel who are trained on these requirements, who are required to know them inside and out, because these requirements basically prevent people working on the right of way from being hit by a train. I mean, it's not a small potatoes type of issue. Why can't Washington Metro, actually adhere to their own requirements? Why aren't the roadway workers in charge? Why aren't the people that work along the track? Why can't they follow the requirements? And I'm really baffled at why that takes place, because this is something to protect themselves and their fellow workers. Does staff have any insight on why Washington Metro can't follow their own rules and regulations? Because they can rewrite the rule book, but if they're not going to follow them, we're not going to get out of reviewing roadway worker protection, every time we have a commissioner meeting. Does staff have any insight on that?
One of the reasons why the roadway worker protection rule as it stands today is being reviewed for streamlining is because there is a suspicion by the people who are working on this effort at Metro that ever since the roadway worker protection rule was instituted in 2010, that additional aspects or criteria within that rule has been inserted almost kind of in a wallpapering approach, even when events have not implicated the lack of a certain protection or control afforded by the roadway worker protection rule as it stood at the time of a given incident. Metro's previous holders or custodians of the roadway worker protection rule have been inclined to add more and more additional conditions, caveats into the rule, and it has become a behemoth, as it were. And so there is a concern by the safety department who's leading this effort to streamline it, that as it stands now, partly the practical drift that we are seeing is because the rule is so complex. It's not simple enough for people to understand and follow, but have to be considered in a whole host of ifs and thens and what ifs and so forth. So that is what they're trying to eliminate, all the unnecessary redundancy that's in the rule that really doesn't afford protection, but essentially ends up confusing the actual fundamental requirements.
Well, I understand that there's some work to be done here, but a lot of the things we're talking about are very basic. No safety briefing at the beginning, not having a proper protection such as hard hats and other things, not having credentials, to be on the roadway. I mean, that to me seems very fundamental, and that there shouldn't be a lot of confusion over that. Those are things that a roadway worker in charge is supposed to be responsible for, and they just don't seem to be doing the basics either. But I find it very frustrating, and yes, maybe the roadway worker protection requirements need some tuning up, but if Washington Metro employees are not going to follow the requirements, we're going to continue to look at roadway worker protection issues in the future, and frankly, we have a risk of either employees or contractors or others, being struck by trains or killed along the right of way. And I think this is something that Washington Metro needs to look at very closely and move forward to improve this situation. And I don't think it's just through rewriting the current rules.
Yes, and an added aspect here, and we talked about this in a couple of previous investigations that we've discussed this afternoon, is the need for a comprehensive compliance program. We understand that there are individuals from the safety department as well as all of the other maintenance departments that have duties to go out and ensure that rules and procedures that govern a certain work practice or an operation is being carried out. However, this has to be done comprehensively, with thought being put into what exactly you do with the results of what you gather up when you're conducting this kind of compliance oversight activities internally. So that is what we see as another aspect that Metro really needs to perform in order to ensure that people know that when there are rules in place and they are meant to be followed, that there is an enforcement mechanism inside the organization through these compliance checks, operational testing checks, to ensure that those things are being complied with. Otherwise, there's no way to enforce the requirements of these rules that are in place. So that is being implicated time and again, the need for a comprehensive compliance testing program.
Absolutely. I think the compliance program is absolutely necessary. I think that these rules need to be followed, and when they're not, there needs to be consequences, and only a comprehensive rules compliance program would be the way to go. But I'm still waiting to see that from Washington Metro, as we all are. So thank you for that answer. I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, that we're seeing a lot of these roadway worker protection issues, and it's really frustrating that we're not effectively addressing them, other than by retraining individual persons who seem to have forgotten, what the requirements are. And so hopefully we can make some progress on this in the future. Thank you.
Commissioner Lobby, you raised an excellent point, and that's that's why I hark back to aviation. That aviation experience is when rules are frequently not being complied with. That's a strong indication that the rule doesn't really fit with the practicalities of the circumstances, and that's where collaboration is so important on making a rule that does work under the circumstances. And that's why I was encouraged to hear Ms. Samarasinha talk about the implementation of a more collaborative approach to develop rules that are more realistic to the circumstances, which hopefully will translate into rules that are being complied with without having to enforce, but rules that are complied with because they are just a very good idea under the circumstances. So that's my encouragement, is that we are headed in that direction.
And we will ensure that we continue in that direction. Chair Hart and Commissioner Lobby, we appreciate your thoughts and your input. I do want to assure you we share your concern, we share your frustration, and we will not shrink away from the efforts to drive safety in the direction that we need to see it go.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Having heard all of that was a very excellent discussion. Are there any other questions for Mr. Walker regarding this report? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to adopt investigation report Whiskey 0098?
So move.
Thank you for the motion, Commissioner Hull. Anyone second the motion?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Rush. We have a motion and a second. I will now ask General Counsel Fultz to conduct our recorded vote.
Thank you. Chairman Hart.
Approved.
Commissioner Al-Khatib.
Approve.
Thank you. Commissioner Bob.
Approved.
Commissioner Farrar-Dyke.
Approve.
Commissioner Hull.
Approve.
And Commissioner Rush.
Approve.
Thank you. Safety Event Investigation Report W0098 is adopted.
Thank you, Ms. Fultz. According to my information, Mr. Bruce Walker is on deck to present our next report, Whiskey 0099. Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0099 covers an improper roadway worker protection event on the Red Line on January 18th, 2021. Under Metrorail's roadway worker protection rules, an advanced mobile flagger, or AMF, is required to be in a place on the station platform to warn train operators that there's a work crew ahead walking towards the train. In this case, the advanced mobile flagger assigned to warn Red Line trains stopping at Tacoma Station, track inspectors on the roadway positioned themselves at the incorrect end of the Tacoma Station platform. The AMF also told the roadway worker in charge that they were in the proper position on the platform before they had even arrived at Tacoma Station. When the AMF did arrive at Tacoma, the AMF got off the train and stood at the end of the platform towards Silver Spring Station rather than the end of the platform for operators moving towards Fort Totten. When the train departed Tacoma Station towards the workers on the roadway without receiving the required instruction to proceed at restricted speed, the AMF did not communicate this emergency to the RIC, to the train operator, or to the Rail Operations Control Center. The train operator came upon the work crew and stopped their train only after passing the work crew. The work crew quickly moved to a place of safety as the train was approaching. A following train picked up the work crew. This event is among the indications that have led us to review Metrorail's physical characteristics training more closely. WMATA is in the process of a roadway worker protection rules overhaul. Extensive training will be required prior to implementation of this update. This event also demonstrates the importance of regular supervisory oversight that fully utilizes all available data as required by the Safety Management Systems approach embodied in WMATA's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, or PTAS. For example, ongoing access to and review of the CCTV video can provide for improved supervisory oversight and monitoring, and can provide another layer of protection to identify safety issues like the one before the hazards that result in consequences such as collision or injury. Thank you. This completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. So am I to understand that the advanced mobile flagger was actually on the wrong track? Because assuming he's on the head end of the track and not the tail end of the track in order to communicate with the engineer, does that mean he was actually on the wrong side?
That is correct. So he lost situational awareness and proceeded to go to the opposite track to where he should have been standing.
So what safeguards would be in place to help prevent that from happening?
Again, training personnel on situational awareness is paramount. You have to know where you are and where your crew is in order to protect them. They, I'm assuming in rushing to get to the position to protect the workers, they just lost perspective as to where they were or where they should be. And in the interviews that were conducted, the AMF said that they would request more time from the RICs to get to the proper location so that this does not happen in the future for this particular person that was involved.
Okay, thank you. Well, as we've discussed lots of roadway worker protection issues in this meeting, Ms. Samar Singer, do you have any further thoughts on this one?
So to going back to the question that you asked about any redundancies to ensure that a failure like this would fail safe. In this instance, really, it was the situational awareness of the train operator that saved the day, really, to ensure that the crew who were on the right of way, which he was not made aware of, were not harmed in any way as a result of the AMF falling down on his duties. And so it is imperative not only for people to understand roadway worker protection rules and comply with them, but understand that the role that they play or the contribution they make to making themselves and others in the rail system maintain safety. And so that really training cannot provide that. People at a certain point in time do need to understand that they have a personal responsibility to take ownership and do their duty as prescribed by their responsibilities.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Samar Singer. That's very helpful. Are there any other questions from any of the other commissioners for Mr. Walker?
Chair Hart, I have a couple of questions.
Please, Commissioner Lowry.
I note in this accident that the AMF was asked, are you in position? And he said, yes, I'm in position, or the equivalent of that, while he was still riding a train to the station. Is that correct?
That is correct, Commissioner Lowry.
So when he got off the train, he already told him that he was in position, ready to provide protection for this crew, but he was actually on a station. He got off, or on a train, he got off on the station and then had the situational awareness problem that he went to the head of the wrong track. He was on track 2 instead of track 1, I believe. Or maybe it's the reverse. But anyhow, there's an integrity issue here too, where someone who is required to protect a crew basically says I'm in position when he's not. He's on a train, and I mean, this is what I mean about the rules. This is real basic. If you're asked where are you and you say I'm protecting the train, I'm in position, and you're not, I mean, how do you address something like that? That's what I find really puzzling about this. Nobody tells a fib about their position, and puts people at risk. I just don't understand why a WMATA employee would consider that acceptable. Thank you.
And I guess I would like to ask, so what is the consequence of that? Meaning that employee is still working on the system?
To answer your question, yes, the AMF that was involved was sent back for retraining on AMF procedures as part of the corrective actions that SAFE said that they were going to take. But yes.
Commissioner Lobby said there wasn't a question of not knowing what their responsibilities were. It was another issue of integrity. So you're saying that they go back for training to show what is good integrity?
So to answer the question, yes, they go back and they are retrained and allowed to continue to work. That's there is a collective bargaining agreement that kind of dictates what happens with employees when situations occur. I understand exactly what you're saying, but WMATA, what they did was retrain the employee. There is really no training provided on integrity, but they trained them on the proper AMF procedures was the corrective action for this incident.
Well, I would have to chime in on that retraining is appropriate perhaps for mistakes, but for outright lying, that's not a retraining issue. It seems to me that requires more severe sanctions than just retraining, because that's an intentional wrongdoing. That's not a mistake.
So the report that we're reviewing, accepting it, rejecting, what does that mean? That we are just approving the results of the incident? Nothing, there's no recourse?
Generally speaking, we don't involve ourselves in direct disciplinary actions or personnel matters at Metro. So in my view, if you as any commissioner vote to adopt this report, all you're doing is signing on as an author that this report is a representation of the facts that the investigation revealed. You're not necessarily agreeing that you believe every statement in the report is the way it should have been, but that it's a report that's been adopted as if it were authored by the WMSC.
So what can we do to send a signal that response to mistakes is substantially different than response to intentional wrongdoing?
I think in your stead, that's a conversation we can have directly with Metro Rail, starting with the safety department. But certainly what you're articulating is a basic principle of just culture, and that is a basic principle of SMS and the public transit agency safety plan that Metro has put forward and that we've adopted. So by extension, monitoring Metro's implementation of just culture is something that is totally within our lane, and we will do that.
So a follow-up question, with this incident, to our knowledge, did Metro address the issue of the employee misleading the rock as to that person's location on the platform when they were still on the train? Do we know if Metro addressed that issue?
Generally speaking, we ask Metro to leave disciplinary and human resources issues out of the reports. If we know, I'll certainly give Mr. Walker or Ms. Samara Singh an opportunity to say so. But generally speaking, we don't view discipline and human resources approaches as a systemic approach. So we generally don't delve into it. I share your interest in this particular case. However, generally speaking, we encourage Metro to leave us out of that.
Okay, thank you.
I will say, I will say, just as a general observation, David, to say discipline policy is not germane to what we do, I'm not sure it's quite right. Ultimately, an organization which doesn't discipline its employees at all is ripe for this sort of thing to take place. So I just think that as a general observation, this is not the first time we've had this conversation. And just a general observation that this may be, this kind of conduct could be a manifestation of a lack of discipline generally taking place. You're saying, this isn't one particular incident, but it might be encouraged by, again, you're right. I think in terms of our previous conversations, we take a hands-off approach. But at some point, we might want to delve into the overall disciplineful philosophy, because a lack of discipline does lead not only to negligent behavior, but it could very well lead to an out and out lying because there's no consequences. So just an observation.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with anything you just said. If this was actually an outright lie, I completely agree that it crossed the line of deliberate misrepresentation. It's not an honest mistake. And if it were my decision making, I would expect the discipline would be taken. But I also want to make sure that that we are aware. I'm not personally aware in this specific case, but in general, Metro does use discipline as a tool in its toolbox. Just because we don't report it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. But your point's well taken. If this was a deliberate misrepresentation, a lie, it was something that crossed the line, and discipline, in my view, would be appropriate.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Well, certainly the just culture concept, as I'm aware of it, does not condone any intentional wrongdoing, and that would include lying. And so I'm just wondering, is there some way that we can, I don't know what the word is, footnote this report to say we would want to know whether Metro has different responses to intentional wrongdoing than it does to mistakes.
Maybe what I can suggest is that we take that specific question as a homework assignment and come back to you with information about Metro's overall approach to just culture and the status of its implementation, because what you just described, not tolerating intentional wrongdoing, is something that should be part of a just culture implementation.
So is it possible to table this report until we get an answer to that, and then modify the report accordingly with that answer?
Yes, definitely the commissioners can take that action.
That's what I would like to suggest, and put it out to the other commissioners for their thoughts. Thank you for Commissioner Lowry for raising this point.
I would support tabling it.
And I guess I would then, if that's the sense of the commissioners, I would defer to our general counsel as to whether we actually need the commissioners to act to do that, or if staff on its own can simply take this report back and provide an answer to that question.
I think we need not vote on the report. I think we can let the minutes reflect that the report was on the agenda, but that following discussion, the commissioners decided that more work was needed. We can simply treat that as a staff level action to then take it back. Pardon me.
That's the direction I would like to pursue, given what you just said, General Counsel Foltz.
Very good. And in so doing, the staff will get a direct answer to the question about the consequences, if any, that this employee faced, any verification that we can about whether or not the misrepresentation was deliberate, and we will modify the report and or the cover page as appropriate.
Yeah, David, if I may just suggest, in addition to what the employee faced, it's sort of more of I'd like a general discussion at least, about discipline and Metro's approach to discipline.
Sure, absolutely.
So, yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Meyer, for taking that approach. Let us move on to the next one. I believe the next one is also Mr. Bruce Walker. That would be report whiskey 0100. Mr. Walker.
Yes, thank you again, Chair Hart. Waiting for the screen to share. There we go. Investigation Whiskey 0100 covers an improper RWP event at U Street Station that occurred on February 5th, 2021. After one work crew established working limits for a radio project between Columbia Heights and U Street stations, another work crew assigned to clean up trash on the roadway entered the roadway without permission. That piggybacking work crew also did not set up a work zone as required under roadway worker protection procedures. A piggybacking work zone requires its own end work area mats, lights, and shunts to provide protection from vehicles being moved into the work area without coordination. None of these were set up. The piggyback work crew also did not place required warning strobe alarm devices or WSADs to provide a warning in the event of unexpected restoration of third rail power. The piggybacking had been properly scheduled in the general order and track right system known as GODERS that is used to schedule work zones. The two work crews had not coordinated arrival times or meeting locations in advance, and the RIC was not aware of all piggybacking work crews. This contributed to the RIC conducting a job safety briefing without the piggybacking crew that planned to work at the U Street station. The RIC later allowed the piggybacking work crew to enter the roadway without a roadway job safety briefing. The radio recordings and the CCTV video demonstrate that the request to access the roadway was made and acknowledged only after members of the piggybacking work crew at U Street Station were already on the roadway. Interviews established that the request to the RIC occurred only after one of the RIC's crew members asked the piggyback crew leader why the piggybacking crew was on the roadway without permission from the RIC. Metrorail did not identify this improper roadway worker protection until after personnel had departed for the night. A communications assistant superintendent eventually reported the event more than 8 hours after it had occurred. Metrorail did not then perform testing as required by WMATA's drug and alcohol policy. While that was outside the testing window for alcohol testing, drug testing would have still been valid. As corrective actions, Metrorail has committed to site visits and safety observations. Metrorail also issued lessons learned documents related to track access and piggybacking work crews. Metrorail is in the process of a roadway worker protection rules overhaul. Extensive training for personnel will be required prior to implementation of this update. Thank you, and that completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Back to the big picture department, Ms. Samara Singha, I'm going to give you the floor.
I think we've raised these considerations to Chair Hart, to you and the commissioners about the need for roadway worker protection rules to be followed comprehensively when those requirements apply to a given condition on the right of way or a work zone. And so here too, you see a whole host of items being listed as being not utilized, even though the work conditions required that these work crews utilize them. In addition to that, you heard the reference to a job safety briefing. These job safety briefings are meant to provide a foundation to everybody who's on that work crew, regardless of whether they are a piggybacking work crew or part of the original group that is under the auspices of the roadway worker in charge. Regardless, roadway job safety briefings are required to be conducted when everyone's best present, and everyone needs to sign off, because not only are they just acknowledging who's on the team, but they are also learning about the parameters of the work zones, the type of work being done, the kinds of protections that require to be in place, who's in charge with what work crew, as well as any emergency response activities, like what number do you call and what hospital will you be taken to if there is an injury. So all these things are required in the job safety briefing to be covered and conveyed to everybody who's on the working within this work zone. And here you're seeing an example where that is being dismissed as kind of discretionary. So another aspect to highlight, and this is also something that the Chief Safety Officer, in her efforts to revamp and streamline the roadway worker protection rule, is working on to assess how well these job safety briefing forms are being utilized, if there's a need to change the way that the job safety briefing itself is conducted. So just to give you a little more insight into the work that is underway.
Thank you, Ms. Marsing. And that is, again, the big picture view is very helpful. And so let me open this up to any other commissioners who may have questions for Mr. Walker. Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to adopt investigation report Whiskey 0100?
So moved.
Commissioner Rush moved. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner Rush. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Hull, second. Thank you for your second. I will now ask General Counsel Fultz to conduct our recorded vote.
Very good. Chairman Hart.
Approve.
Commissioner Al-Khatib.
Approve.
Commissioner Bob.
Approve.
Commissioner Farrar-Dyke.
Approve.
Commissioner Hull.
Approve.
And Commissioner Rush.
Approve.
Thank you. Safety Investigation Report W0100 is adopted.
Thank you, Ms. Fultz. I have on deck for our next report, our Emergency Management Specialist, Mr. Richard Davis. Do I have that correct? Mr. Richard David, do I have that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. David, the floor is yours for Whiskey 0101.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0101 involves a person being struck at Suitland Station on March 13, 2021. The station manager, correctly monitoring CCTV, identified that a customer was laying on the tracks. The station manager attempted to have the approaching train stop. However, the message did not reach the train operator in time. The station manager contacted the Rail Operations Information Center, or ROIC, to report this. The ROIC quickly contacted a rail controller who attempted to relay the message to the train operator. But that transmission to the train operator came at approximately the time the train struck the person on the tracks. The person had been on the tracks for approximately 11 minutes at the time they were struck. They had fallen onto the tracks unintentionally, approximately halfway down the platform. This was not identified until the station manager saw the person on the roadway just before the train entered the station. Following the collision, Metro Rail did not follow the emergency response protocol under SOP 1A related to assignment of an on-scene commander. The person was rescued by Prince George County Fire Department and was taken to a hospital. This event shows the importance and the opportunities for safety improvements through regular and consistent monitoring of available data such as CCTV. This is required in a fully functioning safety management system approach. While a warning was delivered too late in this instance, the station manager should be commended for attempting to avoid this collision. Following this event, the Metro Transit Police Department withheld some video footage from other Metro Rail departments, including the Safety Department. Safety investigations are a critical process that must be used to determine mitigations that can reduce the likelihood of reoccurrence. The safety investigation and any criminal investigation are separate processes that can and do operate in parallel and not in conflict with one another. Thank you, and this completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. David. Are we doing anything about the restriction of access by the police department, by the Metro Police Department to even the departments of Metro? Isn't that so essential for their investigation of what happened and how to prevent it from happening again?
I believe that SAFE, the WMSC, OEM, and MTPD are working to enhance the relationship between the safety and security aspects of what happens. And a good example of that is what Dr. Meyer talked about earlier in the presentation, giving us access to CCTV. So it's a work in process, but I believe it's starting to move forward.
Okay, thank you, Mr. David. Are there any questions from any other commissioner for Mr. David?
I have a couple of questions for Mr. David.
Yes, please, Commissioner.
Mr. David, in particular, focusing on the underlying written report, but you mentioned it in your oral report as well, talking about the phrase was, I don't know if it was consistent monitoring. And I wasn't sure what we were saying or what the report was saying about consistent monitoring. Is the suggestion that the station manager or someone should be continuously monitoring, which doesn't seem to be practical? What exactly are we saying about monitoring?
I'd like to defer to Ms. Samara Singh on this.
So on this, Commissioner Rush, what we mean is utilizing the CCTV feeds real time as well as a monitoring tool, an unobtrusive monitoring tool that supervision can utilize in order to instruct individuals how to do their job better. Aside from that, utilizing such events to ensure that any gaps that are identified through monitoring CCTV footage can be addressed through updating rules and procedures and practices, or even adding on to job responsibilities. Separate and apart from that, what we also mean is when the opportunity provides, to ensure that there is a planned approach on how Metro utilizes CCTV footage for real-time monitoring as well as ongoing monitoring activities that are done after things are retrieved for review later on. So that's what we mean by consistently utilizing the CCTV feeds for multiple uses, for real-time monitoring, as well as coaching and supervisory, as well as updating rules and practices.
Ms. Samara Singh, are you saying that without recommending anything specific, Metro should take a look and just make sure they have a policy in terms of how it's monitored? Is that essentially what, if I could put it in my own layman's terms, what you were saying?
That is correct, because okay. And just to take 30 seconds more, is to tie this back to safety management systems. Safety management systems talks about utilizing all sources of recorded information. It could be electronic radio recording, it could be CCTV footage, it could be work orders or training records, all of which can be utilized to provide an ongoing understanding on how well some practice or responsibility is being carried out, and the opportunities to change those to reduce the occurrence of safety events like this.
My second question was a little puzzled because of, again, this is focusing on the underlying written report, talked about encouraging station manager or training station managers to immediately report specific situations such as this one. But in this case, the station manager actually, I think Mr. David used the word commended, which I think is the right phrase to use. The station manager did actually, as soon as he saw what was going on, did immediately report. So is it just, again, just overall, maybe, the right thing happened here, just make sure it happens again. If it happens again, the station managers take the same action?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
I could say, add something to that. Also, for station managers, usually they would report things on a specific ops only for station managers. And the idea is that maybe Metro Rail could look at training station managers in a situation like this where it needed immediate attention to actually contact the correct ops or the rail traffic controller to be able to stop the train sooner. So that's the idea. Instead of having to contact these separate ops for station managers, because because of the delay, there might have been maybe 30-second or 1-minute delay between the time they contacted their ops, which was ops 5, And that ops contacted the rail traffic controller to speak to the train operator.
That makes sense. Thank you.
No problem.
I have a question. Is there someone else that is monitoring the tracks outside of the station manager? Because usually station manager is involved in things that are happening right there, you know, in the kiosk or something. So is the ROC privy to see everything that's on that?
Yes, inside the ROCC, they're also monitoring CCTV. It's not necessarily everything because they have limited screen space. They're able to go through various stations at different times, but not the whole system. Also, MTPD has a whole center themselves where they also monitor station activity.
So no one else was privy to what was going on at this particular station? I mean, sometimes the station manager is not even in the kiosk. He might be helping somebody somewhere else. So not that it's, I can see where you say you commend because they were aware of what was going on, but I didn't know if the ROC was broken up into different sections where people are monitoring particular stations. And so that is their area that they should be monitoring. And between the ROC and transit police, no one else saw that somebody was off the platform?
No, and Commissioner Farada, just to add to what Mr. David was saying, while the Rail Operations Control Center and others like the Security Operations Control Center that is manned by MTPD personnel have the ability to view any of these camera feeds from any of the station locations that we are talking about, that does not mean that those camera locations are constantly being monitored 24 hours a day. It's select stations based on volume, ongoing occurrences that they might be monitoring. All those things factor into which particular camera angles at which particular stations are being viewed at a given point in time. So it's a cyclical rotational selection of various locations that they are looking at, but it's not, that should not give you any indication that somebody's watching all these locations all the time. That is not the case.
And we don't have that capability where all areas are being monitored at the same time.
Metrorail does not. That's correct. Yes.
And just for clarification, I mean, within the limits of the camera system, the technical capability to look at particular locations may exist. It would be, of course, a personnel resources commitment to be able to look at nearly 100 stations and times multiple tracks simultaneously. And I don't know of any rail property that is able to do that.
Another question, follow-up to this discussion. So there isn't anything inherent in the systems available to a station manager where there is something like a hotline to be able to request an immediate power cut if a person had fallen onto the right-of-way, because obviously there is third rail power. And if a person falls onto a right-of-way in the station area, you know, there is the potential to be electrocuted.
They do have ETS boxes throughout the station, and also, as Ms. Kiro said, they can change channels and go directly to one of the ops channels as opposed to the station manager channel and let them know what's going on for them to cut power.
So to that point, do we know if there's any training to let people know the quickest way to reach the ROC if they have to?
That I do not know.
That is what we are encouraging Metro to consider, having a quicker path that the station manager can utilize through their communications channels rather than going through several intermediary points to communicate something as urgent as somebody who has fallen on the right-of-way.
Is that part of this report or is that elsewhere?
It is part of this report that we've written in as staff observations, and we will be raising that with the Chief Safety Officer as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's a very good discussion. Are there any other questions for Mr. David regarding this report? Okay, hearing none. Is there a motion to adopt investigation report Whiskey 0101?
So moved.
Commissioner T moved. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Bob. Thank you. I will now ask General Counsel Fultz to conduct a recorded vote.
Thank you very much. Chairman Hart,
Approve.
Commissioner Al-Khatib,
Approved.
Commissioner Bob,
Approve.
Commissioner Farrar Dyke,
Approve.
Commissioner Hull,
Approve.
Commissioner Rush.
Approve.
Thank you. Safety and Event Investigation Report W0101 is adopted.
Thank you, Ms. Fultz. Mr. David, would you please present our next report, Whiskey 0102?
Certainly will. Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation 0102 covers a person who was struck and killed by a train at the Shaw Howard University station on March 24th, 2021. CCTV shows that the person had been on the station platform for approximately 7 minutes before they fell off the platform, just as a southbound Green Line train was entering the station. The station operator hit the emergency brake mushroom button approximately 2 seconds before the collision. During the response to this event, 2 uncoordinated 911 calls were made from the Rail Operations Control Center. One call, approximately 2 minutes after the event, was made by a ROCC Assistant Superintendent. 5 minutes later, a Maintenance Operations Center Assistant Superintendent made a separate call. While the train operator was conducting their duties, the Metro Transit Police Department had the train operator sit down on the bench without coordinating this with the ROCC to ensure that the appropriate on-scene command and other emergency process specified in SOP 1A were followed. Following this event, the Metro Transit Police Department withheld some video footage from other Metro Rail departments, including the Safety Department. Safety events investigations are a critical process that must be used to determine the mitigation that can reduce the likelihood of reoccurrence. Again, safety investigations and any criminal investigations are separate processes that can and do operate in parallel and not in conflict with one another. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. David. So what are we doing about the withholding of video footage from Metro Rail Department by the Metro Transit Police Department?
I think with us getting access to CCTV is part of the start.
And that is where our focus has been for the last couple of months. But we do share, and obviously deliberately called it to your attention because we share the concern about the availability of that information within Metro Rail, and it is something we will closely follow and take action as necessary.
Do we know what reasons there are for that withholding? Is there something to preserve it for litigation, or what kind of reasons are there? Do we have any idea?
I believe that you have 49 CFR Part 673. Our oversight is basically on safety, and I guess they consider security a separate process. But as the report said, there's a fine line in between, and they should coordinate with each other to work together with some of those incidents.
So let me rephrase that. Mr. David, you're referring to 49 CFR 674. That's what gives us the regulatory authority to conduct ourselves as safety oversight. But separate and apart from that, there should not be any confusion in Metro that safety and security can take parallel tracks without disrupting the work that each conducts in terms of the the authority and the obligations that they are required to uphold as far as regulations and for us, as far as our compact requires. So there should not be any confusion. If there is, this incident and the one before that we just presented should give ample notice that we intend to conduct safety investigations independently and without any disruption from any other investigations that might be taking place concurrently. But Chair Hart, you asked about why we think there is an issue with safety, the safety department or others having difficulty retrieving footage from the Metro Transit Police Department. We really aren't able to articulate what those issues are. There are anecdotal information that we are that we come by once in a while, but we are not able to attribute that to fact.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Samara Singh. Are there any questions from the commission? Mr. David. Yes, please, Commissioner Farrar.
I heard earlier that maybe you were working out some agreement where they would be sharing some of their videos. To this date, have you received any videos from WMATA that you've been requesting?
Yes, absolutely. Throughout our existence, we've received videos from Metro, and our protocol that was released last month will govern how we receive videos in the future. But I think what's being discussed now is primarily Metro's sharing of videos within its own, from department to department. And this, for instance, the safety department or the ROC's own access to videos when they need them to conduct work.
So the incident that just happened in March, you've received the video for you to review.
I haven't personally reviewed it, so I'd have to defer to others.
Someone on our team has seen the video. You've received the video so that you could see what you were looking for, correct?
On this particular one, Commissioner Farrar, I will need to double check, but we get video feeds for all safety investigations that we conduct investigations on.
Could you check into that and get back to Commissioner Farrar? Actually, let us all know.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from any of the other commissioners for Mr. David?
A question, Chair Hart.
Yes, please, Commissioner Lobby.
Mr. David, I note that on this particular incident, the train entered the station at 38 miles per hour, and on the previous accident, W0101, it entered at 35 miles per hour. Is that within the parameters that Metro has set for speeds entering station?
I would defer to Ms. Quiroz.
Yes, it is.
What's the requirement?
Under 42
Okay,
miles per hour. Yes.
thank you.
And also to answer the question for video concerning this event, yes, we did receive it.
Thank you, Ms. Quiroz. Appreciate that.
Thanks very much. And I would also give either Mr. Walker or Ms. Samara Singh an opportunity to comment on station entry speeds if you care to.
Thank you, Dr. Byer. There has been a permanent order that has come forth after this incident. Train speeds entering the station are now 40 miles an hour. So they have reduced it down from 37 to 42 to no greater than 40 at this moment.
Can I please add a nexus to one of the corrective action plans that promoted Metro doing this? Because following the Farragut West collision in October of 2019, one of the requirements that we issued to Metro through a finding is to look at station approach speeds, because there was the station overruns were implicated in the causation of that event as well, even though that was not the direct reason. However, so there has been a corrective action plan in place that Metro has been working on, which directs Metro to assess the station approach speeds and adjust them accordingly, because there was no rule governing train operators at which speeds their trains would be brought into the stations for berthing. And with our corrective action plan and consistent oversight of that, we were able to ensure that Metro complied with that. And that is the result that Mr. Bruce Walker is reporting out on, that there is now a permanent order that instructs train operators what speed to bring their trains into stations.
Thank you for clarification. Are there any other questions from any commissioners for Mr. David? All right, hearing none, is there a motion to adopt investigation report Whiskey 0102?
Also moved.
I'll second.
Okay, second, Commissioner Hall, Commissioner Rush, thank you for that. I will now ask General Counsel Foltz to conduct a recorded vote.
Got it. Chairman Hart,
Approve.
Commissioner Al-Khatib,
Approve.
Commissioner Bob,
Approved.
thank you. Commissioner Farrar-Dyke,
Approve.
Commissioner Hull,
Approve.
and Commissioner Rush.
Approve.
Thank you. So safety event investigation report W0102 has been adopted.
Thank you, Ms. Foltz. Mr. Walker, please present our next report, Whiskey 0103.
Yes, thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0103 involves an improper door operation at Courthouse Station that occurred on March 14th, 2021. The train operator of a Silver Line train opened the doors at Courthouse Station on the wrong side of the train. The doors were open on the non-platform side for about 20 seconds. The train operator then opened the doors on the correct side of the train, correctly reported the incident, conducted a ground walk around, and offloaded the train. The train operator had not looked out the window of the train on the platform side prior to opening the doors and had instead looked out the window at the tunnel wall. In an interview, the train operator said they were mentally distracted by personal issues, which led to their loss of focus and situational awareness. Metrorail does not regularly conduct ongoing fitness for duty checks immediately before or while the train operators are working. The WMSC's fitness for duty audit draft has been provided to WMATA for 30-day technical review. As corrective actions specific to this event, Rail Transportation is promoting WMATA's Employee Assistance Program and has distributed a lessons learned document. That completes this presentation. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Are there any questions from the commissioners for Mr. Walker?
I have a comment, Chair Hart.
Yes, please, Commissioner Lobby.
I was in reading this report, I was a little bit pleased because last time we had a door open at the wrong side. Nobody confessed that they had made a mistake, and I was pleased with this particular operator. He said what he did, and he reported it immediately, and then he went and followed all the instructions to make sure the train was secured and got the passengers off. But that's kind of how it should work. Having an individual that made a mistake, he calls up immediately, said, I made a mistake. And I was pleased to see that. And I think that's something that should happen more often on Metro. And hopefully this guy didn't get disciplined too badly for this, because he did fall on his sword and did the right thing.
Follow-up question. More of a technical nature with respect to the train operation and the doors. If the system was in full automatic train control operation, would that not have prevented the door from opening on the wrong side?
In general, ATO and particularly the auto door function has safety checks that are designed to prevent this kind of an occurrence from happening. Could the automation possibly fail? I think so. But the reality is on the one hand, Automation could conceivably have prevented this, but on the other hand, we really do have to ensure that during manual operation, it's safe to operate.
Absolutely.
So can I take it from that discussion that there is currently no restriction against opening the wrong side door? I mean, nothing that prevents it from happening is what I mean.
There's not a technical prevention during this period of fully manual operation. There's not a technical override to prevent a train operator from making such a mistake. That's correct.
Thank you. And people, even on their best day, make mistakes. That's a human condition. So I understand that. And I agree with Commissioner Lobby. Kudos to this operator for reporting it and being open with it and doing what he could to fix the problem. Are there any questions from any of the other commissioners for Mr. Walker? Okay, thank you. Hearing none, is there a motion to adopt investigation report Whiskey 0103?
Move approval.
So move Commissioner Bob, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, and who was that from?
Commissioner Rush.
Al-Khatib.
Commissioner Al-Khatib, okay. All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second. I will now ask General Counsel Foltz to conduct our recorded vote.
Thank you. Chairman Hart,
Approve.
Commissioner Al-Khatib,
Approve.
Commissioner Bob,
Approve.
Commissioner Farrar-Dyke,
Approve.
Commissioner Hull,
Approve.
and Commissioner Rush.
Approve.
Thank you. Safety Event Investigation Report W0103 is adopted.
Thank you, Ms. Foltz. We will now take up the next agenda item, which is corrective action plans. Ms. Samara Singha, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Each Metro Rail corrective action plan provides, as you know, a specific plan to address a specific safety deficiency or deficiencies. In relation to the automatic train control and signaling audit, the WMSC has now approved 6 caps for implementation. The WMSC provided the latest feedback yesterday on revisions that are required for the remaining 10 corrective action plan proposals related to this audit to address the audit findings, which we released in May. There are no other cap proposals outstanding right now, and that completes my update on corrective action plans.
Thank you, Ms. Samara Singha. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Samara Singha? Thank you. We will now move on to our next item, which is audits, with an update from Audit Program Manager, Mr. Davis Ratic. Mr. Ratic.
Thank you, Chair Hart. We have transmitted the final draft fitness for duty and railcar audit reports to Metro Rail for its 30-day technical reviews. Those review periods conclude later this month, and we will consider any Metro Rail feedback before issuing final reports. After conducting interviews in June and additional document reviews, we are developing our high voltage and traction power audit report. This week, we started interviews and field observations for our fire life safety and emergency management audit. There are additional interviews scheduled over the next few weeks. We are also just beginning the process for the audit that will follow, which is related to rail operations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ratic. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Ratic? Okay, thank you. Hearing none, the next item on our agenda would normally be resolutions. This is where we would normally consider them, but we have no resolutions for consideration for today. So that completes the public portion of the business of our meeting for today. As a reminder, you can always report any concerns through our website, wmsc.gov, through our social media channels like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or by email. We expect to hold our next public meeting on September 21st, 2021. At that time, we expect that the meeting will again be held remotely via video conference. We look forward to seeing you then. The commissioners do have some further issues to address in executive session. Our bylaws permit closing a portion of this meeting to the public for specific purposes as specified in federal law. Today, this is business, that relates solely to internal personnel matters. As 5 U.S.C. section 552B (F) requires, I request that council certify that the meeting may be closed to the public and to state the applicable exempting provision of the Sunshine Act. Ms. Fultz?
Yes, Chair Hart. This portion of the meeting may be closed as specified in 5 USC 552B paragraph C2 because these are issues that relate solely to the internal personnel practices of the agency.
Thank you, Ms. Fultz. So pursuant to 5 USC section 552B(d), a majority of the members are required to vote to enter into executive session. So I would like to move that we go into executive session for the reasons stated by Ms. Fultz, and that we then adjourn following that executive session. We will publicly reconfirm the topic discussed in the next executive session, in this executive session at our next public meeting. Is there a second to my motion?
So
So moved. Was that Commissioner Rush?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the second. I will now ask General Counsel Fultz to conduct a recorded vote.
Thank you. Chairman Hart,
Approve.
Commissioner Al-Khatib, Commissioner Al-Khatib's image is frozen on my screen. I'll come back to him. Commissioner Bob,
Approve.
Commissioner Farrar Dyke,
Approve.
Commissioner Hull,
approve.
Commissioner Rush.
Approve.
We do have a quorum to allow us to go into executive session. I will return to Commissioner Al-Khatib just once more to see if he's able to respond. And if not, we can carry forward. Commissioner Al-Khatib, are you able to vote?
It looks like he's dropped off.
Okay, well, we do have a quorum and the motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fultz. Again, thank you to everyone for attending this meeting today. It was a very productive session, and I think we accomplished a lot. We expect to hold our next public meeting on September 21st, 2021. We look forward to seeing everyone then. Commissioners, please leave this meeting and join the executive session. Thank you.